Hi, this is Rufus Philpot. Welcome to musictrainer.com. Today I'm going to talk to you about the bass guitar. And something that seems to be missing from a lot of instructional sites seems to be a really good introduction to the workings of the bass, how it's put together, and how to get a good sound out of the instrument. These days, there are hundreds of options in terms of different bass guitars, pickups, strings, bodywoods to choose from. I'm going to start off talking to you about some of the classic designs of the bass and the differences between the 4-string bass and the 5-string bass, which I brought along today as well, and also the fretless bass. In later lessons, we're going to look at these things in more detail. But for today, I'd like to give you just an overview of the bass so that if you're a beginner or a relative beginner, you really start to understand the instrument, how it's put together, and why it's put together the way it is. This is really important because as a bass player, sound is one of our primary contributions to a band. Sound and time, a good time feel. And if you're on a session and the sound of your bass is happening, you're already 50% there. So the bass I've got in my hands today, this is one of the earliest designs of bass guitars. This instrument was made in the mid-60s. And in fact, this design in its primary form came out in the 1950s. And then as it developed into the 1960s, we see that 2 pickups became quite often the norm. And you can see there's some controls here as well, which we're going to talk about. So let's actually start to look at this bass in some more detail. So first of all, we can see this is a 4-string bass. Even today, the 4-string remains like the linchpin of the bass player's stable. A lot of producers really like to hear a 4-string. A lot of bass players believe the 4-string really has kind of like the best sound, certainly on the lower string, on the E string. And we're going to talk about that more too in comparison. So let's look at how it's put together and the components that make up a bass guitar. So let's have a look at the individual components of a typical bass guitar. So working from the bottom of the bass, we can see this is what we call the bridge. This is where the strings attach to the bottom of the body of the instrument. This can be made of steel, brass, even aluminum. Brass remains pretty popular because it also had an added benefit of adding a little weight to the bottom section of the instrument. This also helps the instrument not to be neck heavy. And generally speaking, neck heavy instruments that tend to tilt towards the floor can make your life a little difficult because as you play, your hand is having to support the instrument. So if an instrument balances well, it's again something to look for when you're first trying out a bass. So here's the bridge. We can see within the bridge we have saddles. These are called saddles, these individual sections here, and the string sits on the saddle. Now bridge designs vary, but this is a fairly typical design, and you'll notice there are grooves in the saddle where the string actually sits, and it's important that the string kind of anchors here solidly so the strings don't move around and the spacing alters as you play. Moving further up, we have the pickups. Very important. These are effectively microphones and pick up the sound from the strings. Very important. We have 2 on this bass, and we'll look at the sound of those in a second. Next to these, we have what we call the control plate. On this bass, the control plate is on the top of the instrument. On some basses, the control plate is mounted from the rear, which I'll show you on another instrument. Now, on this particular bass, it's a classic design. We have a volume, and a master tone control. And next to that, the input jack, where the guitar cable actually goes into the body of the bass. And obviously this takes the sound to your amplifier. Now, if we're to look at this, let's just get an understanding of the basic controls here. A lot of students of mine, and I've taught for almost 20 years now, it's surprising when they come to me for a lesson, a lot of people aren't really familiar with the controls on their instrument. And this sounds like such an obvious thing, but people really aren't always aware of that. And you should really get to know your bass, know the controls on it, know the sounds you can cull from the instrument. On a basic instrument like this, which is what we call passive, i.e. it has no battery-powered circuitry in it, it's just all on board, no battery in here. The controls are relatively simple. In this case, we have volume for the front pickup, volume for the back pickup, and a tone control. Now, sometimes these pickups will be referred to as the bridge pickup. Now, as you know, this is the bridge. Obviously, the bridge pickup is closest to the bridge. And this pickup is referred to as the neck pickup because it's closest to the neck of the bass. Now, let's have a listen to how each pickup sounds. First of all, let's listen to just the back pickup, the bridge pickup. You can see it's got a kind of punchy, slightly mid-rangey tone. listen to the front pickup just on its own. You can see it's got a little woofier, fatter sound, a little more old school perhaps. Now we can combine both pickups together. Have a listen to this. This is both pickups turned full on. You can see again, it's like a combination. You still got that kind of old school fatness, but now a little more top end and zing to the sound. Now again, the tone control plays a lot of importance in this. Let's check it out. So I'm still keeping both pickups full on. First of all, I'm going to have the tone control wound full open, so this gives you all the high end of the spectrum. There's an enormous difference when I open that all the way up. You can see you've got that little zing and click to the sound. You can really hear the noise of the strings on the metal frets here. Now if I wind this back, that top end decreases as I turn this control anti-clockwise. Check it out. Now I move it back, and then all the way back. It's a darker sound. And this is really important to understand, the importance of these controls individually and how they can shape your sound. And we're going to look at that more also as I play the 5-string bass later on too in the session. So these are your volume controls and your tone control. And whatever bass you have, it's very likely it will have some configuration that bears some resemblance to that. Volume controls, tone controls. And as we see on the 5-string bass, sometimes you'll have a battery-powered circuit, which will give you even more control over your sound. Now let's move further up the bass.